The Conjure Woman by Charles W. Chestnut. First published in 1899. Narrated by Ashley Harris. Chapter 1. The Groophered Grapevine. Some years ago, my wife was in poor health, and our family doctor, in whose skill and honesty I had implicit confidence, advised a change of climate. I shared from an unprofessional standpoint his opinion that the raw winds, the chill rains, and the violent changes of temperature that characterize the winters in the region of the Great Lakes tended to aggravate my wife's difficulty and would undoubtedly shorten her life if she remained exposed to them. The doctor's advice was that we seek not a temporary place of sojourn, but a permanent residence in a warm and more equable climate. I was engaged at the time in grape culture in northern Ohio, and as I liked the business and had given it much study, I decided to look for some other localities suitable for carrying it on. I thought of sunny France, of sleepy Spain, of Southern California, but there were objections to them all. It occurred to me that I might find what I wanted in some of our own southern states. It was a sufficient time after the war for conditions in the South to have become somewhat settled. And I thought I was enough of a pioneer to start a new industry if I could not find a place where grape culture had been tried. I wrote to a cousin who had gone into the turpentine business in central North Carolina. He assured me, in response to my inquiries, that no better place could be found in the South than the state and neighborhood where he lived. The climate was perfect for health, and in conjunction with the soil, ideal for grape culture. Labor was cheap, and land could be bought for a mere song. He gave us a cordial invitation to come and visit him while we looked into the matter. We accepted the invitation, and after several days of leisurely travel, the last 100 miles of which were up a river on the sidewheel steamer, we reached our destination, an old quaint town which I shall call Patesville, because, for one reason, that is not its name. There was a red brick market house in the public square with a tall tower which had held a four-faced clock that struck the hours and from which there pealed out a curfew at 9 o'clock. There were 2 or 3 hotels, a courthouse, a jail, stores, offices, and all the appurtenances of a county seat and commercial emporium. For while Patesville numbered only 4,000 or 5,000 inhabitants of all shades of complexion, it was one of the principal towns in North Carolina and had a considerable trade in cotton and naval stores. This business activity was not immediately apparent to my unaccustomed eyes. Indeed, when I first saw the town, there brooded over it a calm that seemed almost sabbatic in its restfulness, though I learned later on that underneath its solemn exterior, the currents of life, love and hatred, joy and despair, ambition and avarice, faith and friendship, flowed not less steadily than in livelier latitudes. We found the weather delightful at that season, the end of summer, and were hospitably entertained. Our host was a man of means and evidently regarded our visit as a pleasure, and we were therefore correspondingly at ease, and in a position to act with the coolness of judgment desirable in making so radical a change in our lives. My cousin placed a horse and buggy at our disposal, and himself acted as our guide until I became somewhat familiar with the country. I found that grape culture, while it had never been carried on to any great extent, was not entirely unknown in the neighborhood. Several planters thereabouts had attempted it on a commercial scale, in former years with greater or less success. But, like most other industries, it had felt the blight of war and had fallen into destitute. I went several times to look at a place that I thought might suit me. It was a plantation of considerable extent that had formerly belonged to a wealthy man by the name of McAdoo. The estate had been for years involved in a litigation between disputing heirs, during which period shiftless cultivation had well nigh exhausted the soil. There had been a vineyard of some extent on the place, but it had not been attended to since the war and had lapsed into utter neglect. The vines, here partly supported by decayed and broken down trellises, that twining themselves among the branches of the slender saplings which had sprung up among them, grew in wild and unpruned luxuriance, and the few scattered grapes they bore were the undisputed prey of the first comer. The site was admirably adapted to grape raising. The soil, with a little attention, could not have been better, and with the native grape, the luscious scuppernong, as my main reliance in the beginning, I felt sure that I could introduce and cultivate successfully a number of other varieties. One day I went out with my wife to shore the place. We drove out of the town over a long wooden bridge that spanned the spreading mill pond, past the long whitewashed fence surrounded by the county fairground, and struck into a road so sandy that the horses' feet sank into the fetlocks. Our route lay partly uphill and partly downhill, for we were in Sand Hill County, We drove past cultivated farms and then by abandoned fields, grown up in scrub oak and short-leaved pine, and once or twice through the solemn aisles of the virgin forest where the tall pines, well-nigh meeting over the narrow road, shut out the sun and wrapped us in colloquial solitude. Once, at a crossroads, I was in doubt as to turn to take, and we sat there waiting 10 minutes. We had already caught some of the native infection of restfulness, but some human being to come along who could direct us on our way. At length, a little Negro girl appeared, walking straight as an arrow, with a piggin full of water on her head. After a little patient investigation, necessary to overcome the child's shyness, we learned what we wished to know. At the end of about 5 miles from the town, reached our destination. We drove between a pair of decayed gateposts. The gate itself had long since disappeared, and up a straight sandy lane between two lines of rotten rail fence, partly concealed by jimson weeds and briars, to the open space where a dwelling house had once stood. Evidently a spacious mansion, if we might judge from the ruined chimneys that were still standing and the brick pillars on which the sills rested. The house itself, we had been informed, had fallen victim to the fortunes of war. We alighted from the buggy, walked about the yard for a while, and then wandered off into the adjoining vineyard. Upon Annie's complaining of weariness, I led the way back to the yard, where a pine log, laying under a spreading elm, afforded a shaded, though somewhat hard seat. One end of the log was already occupied by a vulnerable-looking colored man. He held on his knees a hatful of grapes, over which he was smacking his lips with great gusto, and the pile of grape skins near him indicated that the performance was no new thing. We approached him at an angle from the rear, and we were close to him before he perceived us. He respectfully rose as we drew near and was moving away when I begged him to keep his seat. "Don't let us disturb you," I said. "There's plenty room for us all." He resumed his seat with somewhat of embarrassment. While he had been standing, I had observed that he was a tall man, and though slightly bowed by the weight of years, apparently quite vigorous. He was not entirely black, and this fact, together with the quality of his hair, which was about 6 inches long, was very bushy, except on the top of his head where he was quite bald, suggested a slight strain of other than Negro blood. There was a shrewdness in his eyes, too, which was not altogether African, and which, as we afterwards learned from experience, was indicative of a corresponding shrewdness in his character. He went on eating the grapes, but did not seem to enjoy himself quite as well as he had apparently done before he became aware of our presence. "Do you live around here?" I asked him, anxious to put him at ease. Yes, sir. I lives over yonder, behind the sand hill on the Lumberton Plank Road." "Do you know anything about the time when this vineyard was cultivated?" "Lord bless you, sir. I knows all about it. There ain't another man in this settlement who won't tell you, old Julius McAdoo was born and raised on this year same plantation. Is you another gentleman that was gonna buy this old vineyard?" "I'm looking into it," I replied, "but I don't know that I shall care to buy it unless I can be reasonably sure of making something out of it." "Well, sir, you is a stranger to me, and I is a stranger to you, and we both strangers to one another. But if I was in your place, I wouldn't buy this vineyard." "Why not?" I asked. "Well, I don't know whether you believes in conjuring or not. Some of the white folks, they don't, or say they don't, but the truth of the matter is this here old vineyard is Groophered." "Is what?" I asked, not grasping the meaning of this unfamiliar word. "It is Groophered, conjured, bewitched." He imparted this information with such solemn earnestness and with such an air of confidential mystery that I felt somewhat interested, while Annie was evidently much impressed and drew closer to me. "How do you know it is bewitched?" I asked. I wouldn't expect for you to believe me unless you know about all the facts. But if you and young mister don't mind listening to old nigga run on a minute or two while you're resting, I can explain to you how it all happened." We assured him that we would be glad to hear about how it all happened, and he began to tell us. At first, the current of his memory or imagination seemed somewhat sluggish, but as his embarrassment wore off, his language flowed more freely, and the story acquired perspective and coherence. As he became more and more absorbed in the narrative, his eyes had a dreamy expression, and he seemed to lose sight of his auditors and be living over again in the monologue his life on the old plantation. Old Mars McAdoo," he began, "bought this place many years before the war, and I remember well when he sought out this here part the plantation in Scupperness. The vines grow monsters for in Mars Dougal made 1,000-gallon scuppernut wine every year. Nah, if there's anything a nigga love next to possum and chicken and watermelons, it's scuppernus. There ain't nothing can stand upside the scuppernus for sweetness. Sugar ain't a circumstance for scuppernut. This is part 1 of The Conjure Woman. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell for all new parts.